Hello there. It's good to see you. Now, last Saturday, I volunteered to take the devotions when the leadership team met for a retreat day. And as seems to happen quite a lot these days, I started to reminisce. I feel like the old man telling the young people, young people like Mike Oak and Chris Curtis, how it was in the old days. And I was reminiscing about being at the church where Susan and I got married. So we're going back nearly 50 years. And I was a deacon there when I was quite young, and the church was very traditional. They were quite shocked that a 24 or 5-year-old, whatever I was, could be a deacon. Um, anyway, that gave me a position of honour because once you're a deacon at that church, you were kind of regarded as being, you'd made it really. So after we'd left and moved to Twickenham, and I started to work for Tear Fund, I went back to the church. I got asked to preach because being an honoured ex-deacon. So I went and preached and talked to people. They were all pleased to see me. And then a guy who'd been on the diaconate with me came up to me and he said, "Stephen, it's lovely to see you. You don't seem to be as angry as you used to be." And he thought he was paying me an enormous compliment. And I went home really troubled. How was it that I wasn't as passionate about the things I used to be? How was it I wasn't as angry about poverty around the world as I used to be when I was younger in my early 20s? And I thought about this quite a bit and was quite concerned about it. Well, not many years after that, I was traveling in India and went to visit a slum. They were fairly common slums in those days. I haven't been back to India for a while now. I'm sure things are very different. But this was a little patch of land in the middle of quite nice housing. It was about the size of maybe a football field. It had had 300 homes on it, 300 families living there in really sort of makeshift conditions. But what was often happened had happened. A stove had tipped over, a paraffin stove. It had set fire to the dwelling. The fire had swept through the whole slum area, and all 300 houses had been burnt down. And when I went to visit, there was just one old guy. And he was doing something which I'd only read about in books. He was raking through the ashes. He had a stick in his hand. He was standing by what had used to be his home. And he was just sort of poking at the ashes with his stick. And I discovered that he had been somebody who collected jute sacks. And he would wash them and he would resell them. That was how he made his living. And he stored his stock under his house. He lived on them. His family slept on them. And he would collect some and take them out and sell them. And other days he'd bring others back. So when the fire came, he hadn't just lost his home, he had lost literally everything. And he was just standing there and he was poking, raking through the ashes. And I felt helpless. And then I just felt really, really angry. And I couldn't work out why I felt so angry. I just felt full of rage that could happen in a world where there was so much wealth. Why was this guy and his family being reduced to this by this simple accident? Well, I came back. I got over it, as you do. And then a guy called John Stott, who's a well-known Bible teacher from my early days. Some of you will be old enough to remember his name. He came to speak at staff prayers at Tear Fund. And he talked about Jesus and his reactions to what went on around him. He talked about one verse where it says that Jesus snorted with indignation. The word used is the word that a horse makes when it kind of, does that really loud snorting sound. And it appeared that Jesus actually got angry. We know he got angry. He overturned the money changers' tables in the temple, didn't he? And I suddenly felt slightly better that we've been thinking, haven't we, about the coming of the Holy Spirit that makes us more like Jesus. One of the things that might happen if we become more like Jesus is that just occasionally we might get really angry at injustice, angry at what goes on in the world, angry that there are people who suffer unjustly. I felt a bit better about having been angry. And then I realized there's another issue because in our modern world, it's very easy for emotions to be mistaken for action. We get sad about something. Um, we watch the repair shop in our house, and occasionally we shed tears. We are moved with emotion, but it's not an action. It doesn't make any difference to anybody. And it's possible to get angry. It's possible to get angry about something that's happened to me. I can get angry about my football team losing yet again, although I've got used to that, so it's not as bad as it used to be. But if we're angry about injustice, if we're angry about poverty in our world, in our society, here in Bicester, then it's got to somehow lead to action. Every time Jesus is described as having an emotion, when he had compassion, when he was filled with compassion, when he snorted with indignation, he did something about it. I'm constantly challenged. I still want to be able to be angry. Now I'm an old man, but I also want to be able still to do something. One of the great things about being part of a church, about being part of a worshipping community, is they're part of a group of people. And sometimes other people take the action, but we can support them and encourage them. The refugee support group's doing a fantastic job caring for the refugees that come to this country. So occasionally I get angry about what happens with refugees, but it's great to know that I'm part of a church that is doing something about it. So don't just have emotions, but certainly allow yourself to be angry about the things that God gets angry about, and then see if we can be moved into action. See if we can be supporters of the church around the world that does something about these things. So that's the old man rambling on. I'll do it a few more times, I'm sure. You're very patient with me, but it's good to talk to you. Take care.